The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty town of Copper Creek. It was 1882, and the small frontier settlement buzzed with an unusual energy. Word had spread that Marcus Blackwood, the wealthiest and most feared rancher in the territory, was holding an auction at the old livestock barn. Sarah Mitchell pressed her face against the wooden slats of the wagon that imprisoned her. Her wrists were raw from the rope that bound them, and her throat parched from 3 days without proper water. At 19, she had already endured more hardship than most would face in a lifetime. Her father's gambling debts had sealed her fate when he lost everything to Blackwood in a rigged poker game, including his daughter. "Get up, girl!" The gruff voice belonged to Jake Turner, Blackwood's foreman. He yanked the wagon door open, flooding the dark space with blinding sunlight. Sarah squinted, her green eyes adjusting to the brightness as rough hands pulled her onto the platform. The crowd gathered around the makeshift auction block consisted mostly of ranch hands, drifters, and the kind of men who frequented the territory's seedier establishments. Their leering gazes made Sarah's skin crawl as she stood there in her torn blue dress, trying to maintain what dignity she had left. Marcus Blackwood emerged from the shadows, his black suit immaculate despite the dust swirling through the air. At 53, he cut an imposing figure with his silver beard and cold grey eyes that had witnessed countless cruelties without flinching. He owned half the valley and ruled it with an iron fist, his wealth built on cattle, land, and the broken backs of those who dared oppose him. "Gentlemen," Blackwood's voice carried across the crowd like a whip crack. "Today, I offer something special. This young lady comes from good stock, educated back east before her father's unfortunate circumstances brought her here. She can read, write, and knows her numbers. Perfect for keeping house or whatever else you might need." The implications in his tone made Sarah's stomach turn. She scanned the crowd desperately, searching for a sympathetic face, but found only hunger and greed staring back at her. "Bidding starts at $50, Blackwood announced. "60, shouted a portly man in a stained vest. "75, counted another. As the bids climbed higher, Sarah noticed movement at the back of the crowd. A young man, perhaps 25, stood apart from the others. Unlike the rough crowd, he wore clean clothes, a white shirt, dark vest, and well-maintained leather chaps. A pair of pearl-handled Colts rested in holsters at his hips, and his weathered hat cast shadows across sharp features. What struck Sarah most were his eyes, deep brown, and watching the proceedings with an intensity that seemed out of place among the casual cruelty of the auction. $100. The portly man was sweating now, clearly reaching his limit. $150, came a new voice, clear and steady. The young gunslinger had spoken. The crowd parted as he walked forward, spurs jingling with each measured step. Blackwood's eyes narrowed, studying this unexpected bidder. "You got that kind of money, boy?" Blackwood challenged. The stranger reached into his vest and produced a leather pouch, tossing it onto the platform. It landed with a heavy thud that spoke of gold coins within. 200 cash. Blackwood's foreman whispered urgently in his ear. But the rancher waved him off. "Sold!" He grabbed Sarah's arm roughly. "She's all yours, stranger. Try not to break her too quickly." The young man's jaw tightened at the comment, but he said nothing. He climbed onto the platform and to Sarah's. Surprise, his touch was gentle as he helped her down. Up close, she could see a thin scar running along his left cheekbone and noticed the way his hand never strayed far from his guns. "Can you ride?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. We're leaving. Now." As they walked toward a pair of horses tethered nearby, Sarah heard Blackwood call out, "I don't believe I caught your name, friend." The stranger paused, turning slightly. "Or de folks call me Cole Winters." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even in this remote corner of Arizona, the name carried weight. Cole Winters, The gunslinger who'd cleaned out the Wallace gang single-handed, the man who'd faced down. He 3 killers in Tombstone and walked away without a scratch. Blackwood's expression darkened. "This ain't Tombstone, Winters. You'd best remember that." Cole touched the brim of his hat in mock salute. "I'll keep it in mind, Mr. Blackwood." He helped Sarah onto a gentle mare, then mounted his own horse, a magnificent black stallion that looked like it could outrun the wind. As they rode out of Copper Creek, Sarah finally found her voice. "Why?" she asked simply. Cole didn't look at her, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "Nobody deserves to be sold like cattle. Besides, I've got business with Blackwood. You just gave me a reason to start it. I don't understand." "You will." His voice carried a weight that made Sarah shiver despite the heat. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe. Can you handle a hard ride? Blackwood's men will come after us once he figures out what I'm really doing here." Sarah straightened in her saddle. "I can handle whatever's necessary. I'm stronger." "Then I look." For the first time, Cole smiled, just a slight upturn of his lips. "I believe you are Miss Mitchell, Sarah Mitchell." "Well, Miss Mitchell, hold tight. Things are about to get interesting." As they galloped into the desert, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her rescue was only the beginning of something much larger. The mysterious gunslinger beside her rode with purpose, and she sensed that their paths crossing was no mere coincidence. Behind them, dust clouds rose from Copper Creek as riders mounted up in pursuit. Marcus Blackwood stood on his porch, watching with cold fury as his prize disappeared into the shimmering heat waves. "Find them," he ordered his foreman. "And when you do, bring me Winter's guns. The girl, do whatever you want with her after she watches him die." The desert stretched endlessly before them, a canvas of red rock and golden sand painted by the setting sun. They had been riding hard for 3 hours, and Sarah could feel the mare beginning to tire beneath her. Cole, ever vigilant, noticed immediately. "There's a canyon about 2 miles north," he said, pulling alongside her. "We'll rest. And there for the night. The horses need water." Sarah nodded, grateful. Her body ached from the prolonged ride, but she refused to complain. As they crested a small rise, she gasped at the sight before them. Hidden in a fold of the landscape lay a narrow canyon with cottonwood trees clustered around a small spring. "How did you know this was here?" she asked as they descended. "I've been scouting Blackwood's territory for 2 months, Cole replied, his eyes constantly scanning their back trail. "Know every waterhole, every hiding spot between here and the Mexican border." They dismounted near the spring, and Cole immediately set about caring for the horses, while Sarah collapsed gratefully beside the water. As she drank deeply, as she studied her mysterious savior, despite his youth, he moved with the practiced efficiency of someone much older, someone who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. "You said you had business with Blackwood," Sarah ventured, as Cole built a small, smokeless fire. What kind of business?" Cole was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a worn photograph. In the fading light, Sarah could make out the image of a young woman with kind eyes and dark hair. "My sister Emma," he said quietly. "She came out here 2 years ago to teach school and thought she could make a difference in a frontier town." His voice hardened. "Blackwood took a fancy to her. When she refused his advances, he had his men burn down the schoolhouse with her inside, made it look like an accident." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, Cole, I'm so sorry. Town marshal was in Blackwood's pocket, said it was a tragic accident, case closed. But I knew Emma. She was careful, methodical. She wouldn't have knocked over a lantern." Cole's hands clenched into fists. "And I've spent 2 years learning to use these guns, tracking down witnesses, gathering evidence. 3 people saw Blackwood's men that night, but they're all too scared to talk." "So you came here to kill him?" Cole shook his head. "Death would be too easy. I want him to lose everything first. His land, his power, his reputation. I want him to know what it feels like to be helpless." He looked at her then, his brown eyes intense in the firelight. "When I saw you on that platform, I realized you could be the key." Sarah frowned. "I don't understand. How can I help you bring down Marcus Blackwood? You lived in his house for 3 days. You've seen things, heard things, and—" "There's something else." Cole pulled out a leather journal. "Emma sent me letters before she died. She mentioned finding something in the town records, something about how Blackwood acquired his land. She was going to expose him, but she died before she could tell me what it was." "And you think I might know something?" "Maybe, or maybe you can help me find out. Either way, I couldn't leave you there. Emma would have haunted me forever if I'd let another young woman suffer at Blackwood's hands." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Sarah found herself trusting this strange, driven man who'd risked his life for a stranger. As the stars emerged overhead, she made a decision. "There is something," she said slowly. "The night before the auction, I overheard Blackwood talking to a man I'd never seen before, well-dressed, from back east by his accent. They were discussing land deeds and something about the railroad coming through." Cole leaned forward, interested. "Go on." "The man said something about original Spanish land grants and how they superseded American claims. Blackwood got angry, said he'd buried that problem 20 years ago. Then he noticed me and sent me away." "Spanish land grants," Cole mused. "If the original grants still exist and Blackwood's claim is fraudulent, he'd lose everything." Sarah. "Finished. But where would such documents be hidden? That's what we need to find out. But first, we need to deal with our immediate problem." Cole stood, hand moving to his gun. "We've got company." Sarah heard it then. The distant sound. "Of horses, many horses. They're still about a mile out," Cole said calmly. "We need to move. Can you ride in the dark?" "Yes." "Good. We're going deeper into the canyon. There's a place I know where we can lose them." As they quickly saddled the horses, Sarah asked, "How many men does Blackwood have?" "About 30 gun hands, plus ranch workers. But he won't send them all. Probably just Jake Turner and 5 or 6 of his best trackers." They mounted up and plunged deeper into the canyon, following a narrow trail that wound between towering rock walls. The darkness was nearly complete, but Cole's horse seemed to know the way, and Sarah's mare followed trustingly. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, Cole led them into a side canyon barely wide enough for the horses. They dismounted and led the animals up a steep path to a hidden overhang. "We'll wait here," Cole whispered. "Let them pass." They huddled in the darkness, listening as the pursuit party thundered past below. Sarah could hear Jake Turner's voice cursing as they lost the trail. After the sounds faded, Cole finally relaxed. "They'll double back to town, report that they lost us. Blackwood will be furious." "What do we do now?" "We rest tonight. Tomorrow, we head for Silver Falls. There's someone there who might help us. An old Mexican woman who's lived in these parts since before the Americans came. If anyone knows about Spanish land grants, it's her." Sarah settled against the rock wall, suddenly exhausted. "Cole, thank you for everything." In the darkness, she heard rather than saw his smile. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Mitchell. We've got a long way to go before this is over." As sleep began to claim her, Sarah wondered what she'd gotten herself into. But one thing was certain, her life would never be the same again. Dawn broke over Silver Falls, painting the small mining town in shades of gold and crimson. Cole and Sarah had ridden through the night, taking a circuitous route to avoid Blackwood's patrols. Now, as they entered the town's single dusty street, Sarah could barely stay upright in her saddle. "Just a little further," Cole encouraged, and guiding them toward a small adobe house on the town's edge. Smoke rose from its chimney, and the scent of fresh tortillas filled the air. An elderly Mexican woman emerged as they approached, her weathered face breaking into a smile when she saw Cole. "Mijo, you return, just as you promised." "Doña Rosa." Cole dismounted and helped Sarah down. "We need your help." The old woman's sharp eyes took in Sarah's exhausted state and the dust of hard travel on both of them. "Come inside. Quickly now." The interior of the house was cool and welcoming, filled with the scent of herbs and old leather. Rosa bustled about, providing water and food while asking no questions. Only after they'd eaten did she settle across from them, her dark eyes serious. "You're here about the old papers. See?" Cole nodded. "Blackwood's land?" Sarah overheard. "Something about Spanish grants." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, then rose and went to an old wooden chest in the corner. From beneath false bottom, she withdrew a leather portfolio. "My husband was the clerk here when the Americans came," she said softly. "He kept copies of everything, even when they told him to burn the originals." She opened the portfolio, revealing yellow documents covered in elegant Spanish script. "To the Rancho del Sol grant, 20,000 acres, given to the Mendoza family in 1821 by the King of Spain." Sarah leaned forward, studying the documents. "This covers all of Blackwood's ranch and more." "See, but the Mendozas, they are all gone now, killed in what Blackwood called an Apache raid 23 years ago." Rosa's voice was bitter. "But my husband, he knew it was no Apache who killed them. The arrows were wrong, the attack pattern nothing like Apache ways. Blackwood murdered an entire family for their land." Sarah's voice was horrified. "The parents and 3 sons," Rosa confirmed. "But there was a daughter, Isabella. She was away at school in Mexico City when it happened. When she returned and tried to claim her inheritance, Blackwood had already filed American papers claiming the land was abandoned. The sheriff, the judge, all were in his pocket. Isabella fled to Mexico, and we never heard from her again." Cole studied the documents intently. "These prove Blackwood's claim is fraudulent, but we need more. We need Isabella Mendoza or her heirs." "Perhaps," Rosa said slowly, "you already have her." Both Cole and Sarah looked at her in confusion. "Tell me, child," Rosa addressed. "Sarah, what was your mother's name?" Sarah frowned. "Mary Mitchell. But she died when I was young. Father said she was from California originally, and her maiden name. I don't know. Father never spoke of her family. Said they were all dead." Rosa reached out and gently touched Sarah's face, turning it toward the light. "Those green eyes, that bone structure. I knew Isabella Mendoza, child. You have her look." The room spun around Sarah. "That's impossible. My mother was Mary Mitchell from California, or Maria Mendoza, who fled to California and married an American to hide her identity," Rosa suggested gently. "It would explain why your father never spoke of her family, why there were no relatives at her funeral." Cole's mind was racing. If Sarah is Isabella's daughter, she has a legitimate claim to the land, better than Blackwood's. "But I have no proof," Sarah protested. "No documents, nothing to connect me to." "These Mendozas?" Rosa smiled sadly. "Your mother was clever, mija. She would have left you something, some proof of who you were. Think, did she leave you anything unusual? Jewelry, perhaps?" Sarah's hand went unconsciously to her throat, where a small silver locket rested. "This, Father said it was the only thing of value she owned. I've worn it since she died." With trembling fingers, she opened the locket. Inside, instead of the usual photographs, was a tiny piece of paper folded impossibly small. Rosa helped her extract and unfold it, revealing a miniature birth certificate in Spanish. "Maria Isabella Mendoza," Rosa read, tears in her eyes, "born in Rancho del Sol, daughter of Don Alejandro and Doña Carmen Mendoza." She looked up at Sarah. "This is your mother's true birth certificate, child. You are the rightful heir to everything Blackwood has stolen." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her entire life had been built on lies, her identity hidden even from herself. Cole reached out and steadied her as she swayed. "We have what we need," he said grimly. "Now we have to figure out how to use it. No local judge will rule against Blackwood." "There's a federal judge in Tucson," Rosa suggested. "Judge Harrison. He's honest, can't be bought. But getting there alive will be another matter. Blackwood has eyes everywhere." As if to underscore her point, the sound of approaching horses filled the air. Many horses. Cole moved to the window, peering through the curtains. "Turner found us. He's got at least a dozen men with him." "There's a back way," Rosa said urgently, leading them to a hidden door. "Through the old mine shaft. It comes out near the cemetery. Your horses." "We'll have to leave them," Cole decided. "Rosa, can you—" "I'll hide the documents and get them to Judge Harrison myself. I'm just an old woman selling herbs. No one will suspect." She pressed the portfolio into Sarah's hands. "Take the originals, Mija. They belong to you." They slipped out the back as Turner's men surrounded the front of the house. The mine shaft was dark and treacherous, but they had no choice. Behind them, they could hear Turner's voice demanding Rosa open the door. The shaft seemed endless, and Sarah fought claustrophobia as they felt their way through the darkness. Finally, they emerged near the town cemetery, blinking in the sudden sunlight. "We need horses," Cole said, scanning the area. "And we need to move fast." They made their way carefully through the headstones toward the livery stable at the edge of town. But as they approached, Sarah grabbed Cole's arm. "Wait, look." Turner had been smart. He'd left men at the livery, knowing they'd need horses. "What do we do now?" Sarah whispered. Cole's face was grim. "We fight our way out, or we die trying." "There might be another way," Sarah said slowly. "If I really am Isabella, Mendoza's daughter, if this land is rightfully mine, what if I face Blackwood directly, publicly? He'll kill you. Not if there are witnesses, not if the whole town is watching." Sarah's green eyes blazed with newfound determination. "I'm tired of running, Cole. My mother ran her whole life." "I won't." Cole studied her for a long moment, seeing not the frightened girl from the auction, but a woman discovering her own strength. "It's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. But at least this way, we choose the battlefield." A slow smile crossed Cole's face. "You know what? You might be right, but we do this smart. We need allies, witnesses, and we need to make sure those documents get to the federal judge, no matter what happens to us." "So what's the plan?" "First, we get word to every honest citizen in the territory that there's going to be a show in Copper Creek tomorrow noon. Then," his hand dropped to his guns, "we give them a show they'll never forget." The sun stood directly overhead as Sarah Mitchell, or Maria Sarah Mendoza, as she now knew herself to be, rode into Copper Creek's main street. Beside her, Cole Winters sat easy in his saddle, his hands relaxed but never far from his guns. Behind them rode an unlikely procession. Judge Harrison from Tucson, Marshal Ben Cooper from Silver Falls, Doña Rosa, and nearly 30 citizens who'd answered Cole's call for witnesses. Word had spread like wildfire through the territory. The mysterious gunslinger and the girl Blackwood had tried to sell were returning to challenge the most powerful man in Arizona. The entire town had turned out, lining both sides of the street, creating a corridor of humanity through which the riders passed. Marcus Blackwood stood on the porch of the Cattleman's Hotel, his best gunmen arrayed around him. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he watched the procession approach. Jake Turner stood at his right hand, fingers twitching near his holster. "That's far enough," Blackwood called out as they reached the center of the street. "You've got some nerve coming back here, Winters," Cole dismounted slowly, helping Sarah down from her horse. She wore her mother's locket openly now, and carried the leather portfolio with the Spanish land grants. Despite the danger, she felt strangely calm. "Mr. Blackwood?" Judge Harrison spoke first, his authoritative voice carrying clearly. "Now I'm here in my capacity as a federal judge to oversee the presentation of certain documents regarding land ownership in this county. This is my town, Judge. You have no authority here. Federal law supersedes local authority, as you well know." The judge dismounted, his bearing dignified despite the tension. "Now, Miss Mendoza has something to say." A murmur ran through the crowd at the name. Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Maria Sarah Mendoza. My mother was Isabella Mendoza, sole surviving heir of Don Alejandro. Mendoza, who was granted 20,000 acres by the King of Spain in 1821. She held up the documents. "Oh, I have here the original land grants, which predate any American claim to this territory." Blackwood's face had gone pale. "Impossible. The Mendozas are all dead." "Murdered, you mean?" Cole interjected. "By men dressed as Apaches, on your orders." "You can't prove that." "More actually," Marshal Cooper spoke up, "we can. Rosa's husband kept detailed records of the so-called Apache raid. The arrows used were from a tribe that lived 300 miles away. The attack pattern was all wrong. And then there's this." He produced a worn ledger, your own foreman's accounts, showing payment to special contractors the day before the Mendoza family died. Turner's hand went for his gun, but Cole's Colt appeared in his hand as if by magic. "I wouldn't, Jake, not unless you want to die in front of all these good people." "This proves nothing," Blackwood snarled. "That girl could be anyone. You have no proof she's Isabella's daughter." Sarah opened her locket, showing the miniature birth certificate. "My mother hid her identity to protect me, but she made sure I'd know the truth one day." She turned to address the crowd. "For 23 years, Marcus Blackwood has built his empire on stolen land and innocent blood. It ends today. You think a piece of paper changes anything?" Blackwood stepped down from the porch, his men moving with him. "I've held this land for over 2 decades. I've built it into something. These people depend on me for their livelihoods, built on a foundation of murder," Cole said coldly, "just like you murdered my sister when she threatened to expose you." The crowd gasped. The story of the schoolteacher's death had been whispered about but never spoken. Aloud, "Your sister was a meddling fool who didn't know her place," Blackwood spat. Just like this one." He gestured at Sarah. "You think you can waltz in here with your papers and your federal judge and take what's mine? I'll see you all dead first." "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Harrison's voice was stern, "you're speaking." "Treason against federal authority. I strongly advise—" The shot came without warning. Turner had drawn, not on Cole, but on Sarah. Time seemed to slow as Cole moved, shoving Sarah aside as he drew and fired in one fluid motion. Turner's bullet whined past Sarah's ear as Cole's shot took him center chest. Turner toppled backward, his gun falling from nerveless fingers. The street erupted. Blackwood's men went for their guns, but the citizens who'd come as witnesses weren't the helpless townsfolk Blackwood had counted on. Many were veterans of the war, miners, ranchers who'd suffered under Blackwood's rule. They drew their own weapons, and suddenly Blackwood's gunmen found themselves outnumbered and outflanked. "Stop!" Judge Harrison's voice boomed. "Anyone who fires on federal authority will hang." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Blackwood stood in the middle of the street, his empire crumbling around him, his men looking uncertainly between their boss and the armed crowd, surrounding them. "It's over, Blackwood," Cole said quietly. "You can surrender to the judge, or you can die here in the street like the dog you are. Your choice." Blackwood's hand hovered near his gun. You think you've won? You think killing me changes anything? There'll always be men like me, boy. Men with the strength to take what they want. Maybe, Sarah stepped forward, no longer afraid, but there'll also be people willing to stand up to men like you, people who believe in justice, in truth, in doing what's right, even when it's dangerous. She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying the authority of her birthright. And I am the rightful heir to Rancho del Sol, but I don't want to rule over you like Blackwood did. If Judge Harrison confirms my claim, I propose we divide the land fairly among all the families who've worked it. Everyone who's spent years building this community deserves a piece of it. The crowd stirred, hope lighting faces that had known only fear and submission. "Oh, you can't do that," Blackwood roared. "I won't let you." He went for his gun. Cole had been waiting for it, had seen the moment of decision in Blackwood's eyes. Both men drew, but Cole had spent 2 years preparing for this moment. His shots were precise, grouped in a tight pattern over Blackwood's heart. The rancher's gun never cleared leather. Marcus Blackwood fell to his knees in the dusty street, looking down at the spreading red stain on his vest with something like surprise. You actually did it." "For Emma," Cole said quietly, "and for all the others you've hurt." Blackwood toppled forward and lay still. Around the street, his remaining gunmen threw down their weapons, hands raised in surrender. Indeed, the tyranny of Marcus Blackwood had ended not with a whimper, but with the thunder of justice served. Judge Harrison stepped forward, his voice official. "As a federal judge, I hereby recognize the legitimacy of the Spanish land grant, and Maria Sarah Mendoza's claim as rightful heir. Marshal Cooper, please take these men into custody pending trial for their various crimes." As the marshal and deputized citizens rounded up Blackwood's men, Sarah found herself standing beside Cole. The gunslinger had holstered his weapons and stood looking down at Blackwood's body with an expression she couldn't read. "It's finished," she said softly. "Yeah." Cole's voice was distant. 2 years of planning, and it's over in seconds. "What will you do now?" He looked at her then, and for the first time since she'd met him, the shadows seemed to lift from his eyes. "I don't know. I've been living for revenge for so long. I'm not sure what comes next." Sarah smiled, gesturing at the celebrating townspeople. "How about helping build something instead of tearing it down? I meant what I said about dividing the land, but I'll need help managing it all, making sure it's done fairly." "You offering me a job, Miss Mendoza?" "I'm offering you a chance at a different life, Mr. Winters. Question is, are you brave enough to take it?" Cole laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "You know what? I think I might be." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Sarah looked around at the town that would no longer live in fear. There would be challenges ahead, legal procedures, land surveys, the hard work of building, a true community. But for the first time in her life, she felt she was exactly where she belonged. Doña Rosa approached, tears streaming down her weathered face. "Your mother would be so proud, mija. You faced the dragon and won." "We won," Sarah corrected, looking at Cole, at the judge, at all the people who'd risked everything to stand with them. Together. That night, as Copper Creek celebrated its freedom, Sarah stood on the porch of what had been Blackwood's ranch house, now hers by right, but soon to be divided among many. Cole stood beside her, no longer the driven gunslinger, but a man finding his way toward a new purpose. "Thank you," she said simply, "for saving me, for believing in justice, for everything." "Thank you," he replied, "for showing me there's more to life than revenge." Under the vast Arizona stars, two souls who'd found each other in the darkest of circumstances looked toward a future bright with possibility. The desert wind carried away the ashes of the past, and in the morning they would begin building something new. The legend of the gunslinger who bought a girl's freedom and discovered a stolen legacy would be told around campfires for generations. But for Sarah and Cole, it was simply the beginning of their story, a story of justice served, love found, and the courage to stand against tyranny no matter the cost. In the end, Marcus Blackwood had been right about one thing. There would always be men like him. But as long as there were also people like Cole Winters and Sarah Mendoza, willing to risk everything for what was right, hope would never die in the American frontier.